The purpose of the session is to talk about jobs in the economy, as everybody knows, and in particular, I think we're all particularly concerned about jobs for young people, jobs in rural communities. What can we do ourselves to put energy into a process of creating employment?
From Taymouth. This is a question, I guess, would not be for the conservatives or the liberals, because they have been in power, and my honest opinion as a citizen is that you serve the best interests of citizens, but you have a wrong conception of what a citizen is. It's a corporation, according to your view, so you serve corporations. Now, the question is, in January this year, an NGO called Oxfam, which is a British NGO that has worldwide coverage, made a very unique call. They made a call to end extreme, not poverty, but extreme wealth, because it has been shown that extreme wealth is very bad for any society, and we have a very good example here in New Brunswick. We have a situation where a handful of families have more wealth than probably more than half of the poorest New Brunswickers. So, on the other hand, we have seen, I think, that this myth of the trickle-down economics, where you benefit the rich, they will create jobs, and it's good for everyone, this is just a lie. And one of the things that Oxfam is saying is we should stop the global race to the bottom of corporate taxes. We should abolish tax havens, and we should tax the wealthy properly. So my question to those of you who have not been in power yet, do you think that do we still have a chance of having a political party that serves the interests of the real citizens and not of the corporate citizens? And what are your?
Basically, the thinking you're on is exactly why we started a party. We felt the elitism that's in politics is killing the everyday New Brunswicker. We all know in this room that over the past decades, corporate welfare has taken from the people that pay taxes. And until we change the mindset of politics and government to give strength to small and medium-sized businesses, this is what the People's Alliance is all about. We do not believe in subsidizing the elite corporate massive entities that continue with their hands out. It hasn't worked, it's not working, it's the reason we have the massive deficit and the debt that we have. And until we completely change course, focus on the little guy, get back to the everyday people, stop the elitism, the patronage that goes on with the major two, the cronyism and nepotism is beyond control and unfathomable. But you know, in all honesty, I think as much as the politician needs to change, I think we as voters have got to change the way we think as well. We have to break away from traditional lines, start looking at policies and ideas, and vote according to those policies and ideas. And I think that is what's going to change the course of the province.
You might be surprised to hear this from a New Democrat. I don't really care about people being rich. I care about people being poor. When the two come into conflict, I'm going to side with the people who are poor and do everything to make sure they're lifted up out of poverty through a combination of government programs, whether it's education, the infrastructure people need to be able to get somewhere to get a job, hopefully not the highways 1 hour down the road that Mr. Harper believes with his EI reforms are going to solve our employment problems. But the broader point, absolutely. But we always hear politicians talking about, oh yeah, we're going to have a government for the little guy. It's the Tory slogan the last election, putting New Brunswickers first for a change. And all these sorts of things, it's incredibly easy to say. And I don't mean to be dismissive about that, but because it is difficult. There's a reason why people who are wealthy and influential are wealthy and influential. They've managed to use, whether fairly or unfairly, the system in their province or state or country to manage to reach that position, or they've inherited it, in which case they have even more power. So how do you stop that from having an influence? And one of the biggest ways that you can do that is by, for a politician, passing laws to change it and making sure those laws are enforced. So that's why the other week, the NDP put forward another plank in our anti-patronage laws, that 2 of them were picked up by the Conservatives and were picked up a little bit by the Liberals as well, who said they wanted to take them even further, which is great, on making sure people are hired based on merit for Crown corporations, and making sure there's a waiting period so politicians can't just waltz out the door of the legislature and into a high-paid government job without any application process. But the next one, so those apparently are going to be passed into law. So I'd like to thank the Conservatives for doing that and for the Liberals for putting the pressure on, I hope, in the legislature. But they haven't voted yet, so we'll see. But one that they haven't even talked about voting on was one we put forward last week, which is, let's do what the federal government has done and what nearly every other Canadian province has done, and ban corporate and union contributions to political parties. We can't go around talking about creating democratic grassroots politics if non-citizens are able to contribute directly to the political process. So there's a reason why the old line parties like corporate contributions. They've made up a large percentage, in some cases the majority in some years, of the donations to those parties. It would be difficult if those donations were gotten rid of. It would make politicians work harder. But imagine if you not only got rid of those donations from people who are not citizens, you also lowered the contribution limit so that politicians had to go out and work for every $100 donation and build their campaigns that way. Because we keep on saying, oh, well, you need money to run election campaigns. Sure, you need some. But I've never heard anyone say, you know, come election time, there are too many political ads on TV. Yeah, I just see, rather not enough. You know, I want to see more Liberals and Conservatives telling me their slogans, telling me their 20-second synopsis of their platforms. You don't often hear that. So if we restricted the funding further and said that parties have to go out and collect a maximum of $100 from each person, that would really transform the way politics is done, because it would make a lot of our politicians who can get caught up in the Fredericton bubble stay out and stay reconnected with the public, because they know they've got to go and talk to people and convince them to put their money where their mouth is. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, and it shouldn't be a lot of money, because you want to make sure that the voice of someone from the McCain family is equal to someone who just got off social assistance, who's trying to raise 2 kids on her own, who's living in a small community struggling with the closure of a pulp mill, for example. You want to put those people on as equal footing as possible. And one of the ways to do that is to change the way that parties are financed. So this is something that even, God forbid, the federal Tories finally got on side with. So you'd think that here in New Brunswick we'd be able to do it. But again, I am still waiting to hear from my friends in the Liberal and Conservative parties about whether they're interested in adopting this bill. We've got it translated, both languages, ready to go. So if you're represented by a Tory or a Liberal, ask them to implement that NDP bill against corporate and union donations to political parties. And that's a small, concrete start to the sort of changes that Guillermo was talking about.
You know, the question that you raised is very interesting, and I think warrants some reflection. One of the things that's going on in New Brunswick, and has been going on for some time, is people increasingly have not felt well served by their government. So when the decision was made to try and sell MB Power, people organized to oppose it.
Can't hear you back here, David.
Sorry, successfully. The mic is really tiny, or invisible. I'll try and speak louder. So people organized to oppose the MB Power deal, and successfully did so, and it was one of the reasons the former government fell. The same thing with this whole fracking plan. People have organized because many people feel it is not what they think is consistent or safe or secure for their communities. Not well served. And the Idle No More movement now has brought together Native and non-Native people in this province to say enough is enough. We're not going to be asleep anymore. We are going to take action and demand some real responsibility and accountability and change. So I think that is so hopeful that is what's going to drive some change, and hopefully drive change in the way we practice democracy in the province. We've got to change the system in some ways so that it works better, because it's broken. We need to fix it, and that means changing it so that people are more engaged, have more authority, more ability to play a meaningful role in decisions that affect their lives and the future of their communities. And so let's figure out how to do that. There's no blueprint for that. That's something that we need to discuss and sort out. If someone comes along suggesting there's a blueprint how to do it, run. run, because that requires everyone engaged to sort out how we go down that road. But it's a road that we need to go down if we're going to have a healthy future for New Brunswick.
Can we hear at least one thing that's very, very specific that we can walk out this door with tonight and say, well, we know that at least. So I'm just going to ask you for a show of hands, just a show of hands, each political party, raise your hand if you are in favor of a $100 cap on donations for political parties.
Oh, I know. Mike, and then Joe.
I just feel that the parties that got into government here in New Brunswick, they have been liberal and conservative. There has not been an NDP government. There has not been a government made up of independents or something rationed according to the number of votes that were for different individuals. But these governments which have been in power, it's just you take what you want, give excuses for everything, and when we get our turn, we'll do the same thing. While we're in the opposition, we will criticize you on issues such as shale gas, and when we're in, we'll modify our positions. But the 4 years, or the 8 years, or the 12 years, or 16, whatever it was that Hatfield had, that won't keep us from filling our pockets, because there's all kinds of, everything in New Brunswick is patronage, and it has been going back to the... I won't say a whole lot, except that, are you the husband of Fighting Maggie Connell? Maggie Connell took on our finance minister when he was on this pretentious tour around the province to find out what would you like to spend on, what would you like to get more taxes on. It was on Taymouth, and Paul, what's his name, on the Rolling Home the Shift show, he happened to replay it and happened to hear when it was in. And she stood up and she said, yes, I have an issue. It happened to be shale gas. And I don't go and talk about, shut her mic off. And she told him off. So I called her up to congratulate her. I think that that is the spirit that we need, in addition to becoming more informed, a little more intellectual, a bit more research at the age of 70. I'm becoming a bit feisty. I'm becoming a little bit self-centered. And I think that what we can do that helps an awful lot is individuals here, and the protesters who have become white-haired, people look at them and say, oh, a bunch of darling old people, just wait another, by the time our term's up, they'll all be in the grave anyway. We don't have to listen to them on shale gas or any other issue or on the hospital issues or anything that was on the radio this morning. These are the people that were saying, oh, they're just a bunch of young riffraff, they've never even been to college yet, they don't dress well. So there's no way they're going to listen. Take them on. Every government member, and if you guys ever become leaders of a party or become in the government, it will be the same thing. As far as I'm concerned, you are a group of employees, managers whose salaries are paid entirely by taxpayers. Some will pay a lot more tax than me. And I don't have to use the media. A lot of people do, social media. But I have a telephone at home. And every morning, there's one or more issues that come up on the radio that I don't have to think about what the theory is, what the long-term plans is, what the terminology is going to be for government to react to this. Just answer the question.
Every time you come to these meetings, you always hear MLAs and people in the government always saying about our kids going out west, kids going out west. Well, there's a half a dozen kids in my family that are all highly educated, and none of them went out west. But they didn't stay in the Brunswick. You know, they didn't stay in the Brunswick. And I don't think a lot of the kids coming up are going to stay in the Brunswick. There's not too much here for them, unless you're bilingual. If you're bilingual, you work for the government, you have a job. But if you're a laborer or not bilingual, that's what you new people got to work on, is the jobs for the poor people that don't have education. Because I hear you talking about education, education, education. Well, there's a whole group of people out there that aren't cut out to be education, education, education. They need jobs. They need labor jobs. I've been working for 38 years. Since I was 15 years old, I started. I've been paying taxes since then. So it can be done. You know, you need those people out there. most of them today have to have grade 12 to even do what I do. And they don't need grade 12 to do it. Those guys that aren't so successful in school can do these jobs. And that's the ones that are sitting home right now. And that's the guys that are on unemployment half the winter. Because they're getting a little bit of work. Because the government's creating this little bit of work to keep them going. And that's it. So hopefully these new parties come up with jobs for everybody, not just the guys with the college degrees.
The People's Alliance supports bilingualism. We do not support the current way it's implemented. We are the only party in New Brunswick that will even talk about it. Since we've come out with our our Policy on Official Languages Act, we have had a lot of emails, a lot of people that you're referring to that have wrote us and said they were very qualified, very experienced, lived in either predominantly Francophone or predominantly Anglophone area of the province. They could not get a job because they could not speak both languages, even though they never needed to.
Right.
So what we are saying as a party is language quotas should never trump experience and qualifications. That if you've got the qualifications met, you should be allowed to be hired for that job. Concerning education, another thing that we've said as a party is we need to reintroduce the trades in school, because I agree with you. There are some people out there, they're not academics. They're not ones to get into books and have that form of education. They're hands-on people, they're practical people, they're mechanics, they're carpenters. So what we are saying as a party, we have to reinvest. Government has got to reinvest back into the trades at the high school level. So at least it gives students the opportunity to see which place they fit, what gets them up in the morning.
Because you don't even have that in high school today.
You don't. And not only that, but you don't even have bilingual courses offered in high school today.
One of the things we've got to try and do when we reform the education system is make it something that is available to everyone. Because I'm sure that everyone in this room knows people who maybe didn't want to go to university, maybe even struggled in school. But the fact that our standards in our education system are so much lower than most other comparable either provinces or countries is just unacceptable. And when you need to know how to use a computer to be able to get a job to go and work in the woods, because the logging equipment now needs computer skills to be able to operate it, you've got to be able to pass safety exams and so on. But I was talking to one of the larger forest companies in the province. They weren't able to hire New Brunswickers for more than 5% of the jobs that they offered for one project last year. And the biggest problem was a lack of literacy skills. So the first thing we can do on that is absolutely say that education shouldn't be just about our kids, especially in a province where we've got a smaller and smaller number of kids and a growing number of seniors who maybe are retired or are looking to try and find new work because the economy is falling out from underneath their feet. And we've got to make sure that people continue in paid work so that we don't put a complete burden on our pension system and everything else in the years to come. So let's make easily available literacy courses for absolutely anyone who wants them. Computer skills as well, because that tends to be the easiest way to teach literacy skills. Is not say that, oh, you can't read and write, because that has a stigma to it. But if you say to people, look, we're going to give you skills on how to use computers, how to handle documents, the sort of skills that you're going to need in every single job out there. Because the reality is that the jobs where you don't need reading and writing skills are pretty much gone. Because those are the jobs that people, and many of them have got the ability to read and write in 2 or 3 languages, which is a problem for us in the future. Those people are all living in the places where I used to work in Asia and Africa. And they're all willing to work for 18 hours a day for $2. So we're not going to be competing for those jobs, and we don't want to be. You know, all power to people who are doing their best to lift themselves out of poverty. But our competition here in New Brunswick is going to be with places that are better educated, places that are earning higher wages. And so we've got to find a way that we can compete. And part of that has got to be making sure that before we get into the discussions around bilingualism, that we make sure people can read and write in their mother tongue. That should be the absolute bedrock guarantee that any New Brunswick government gives to its kids, and then that we offer free courses for people who want to increase their skills after they leave school. On the bilingualism side, it's something that, I think it's a bit unfair of Kris to say there's no position. The Liberal Party and the Conservative Party deserve credit for having invented equal opportunity in the case of the Liberals and the Hatfield reforms that helped entrench it. But the reality has been that we have failed to make this a bilingual province, partly because we failed to make it a unilingual province, because people can read and write in their own language first. So let's work on the foundations of the school system. Let's get people up to speed in their mother tongues. Let's make sure, though, as Kris says, that we do have universal bilingual education offered and available for people, because that's one of the biggest crimes right now, is that we have people in rural parts of the southern New Brunswick especially, where you can't get French immersion. And if it's going to be a bilingual province, that means we have to offer bilingual opportunities to everyone. And if we missed people in school, it's got to be available for them as adults as well. And I was lucky enough, I went through French immersion the second year it was introduced, and it made a huge difference to my life. And it's totally unfair that I got that benefit because I grew up in Fredericton, and someone who lived 40 kilometers down the road didn't, just because they happened to be in a different school district. So we've got to eliminate that unfairness. And that links into another area where rural jobs can be protected and enhanced, because we'll make sure people get the same basic educational opportunities anywhere in New Brunswick, which doesn't exist right now.
I got to admit to you, when I became, after my education, and I went in the labor force, it was a big advantage for me. It was a big advantage for me to be bilingual, because the company I worked for, being involved in politics, I traveled the world, and I travel a lot in Europe and the States and in Canada, and I was able to communicate with them either in French or English. And to have access to more than one language, it's a benefit. It is a benefit. And we're all New Brunswickers. And I understand that in some communities, maybe you don't have the same opportunities than others. And it happens also in the Francophone side of New Brunswick that doesn't have a second language. I think government's got a role to play in trying to offer some of these tools to our people. Because, you know, we talked about the economy, we talked about challenges that we have in trying to grow the economy. We talked about the globalization of the world today. It is very competitive. And one of the biggest benefits that a person can have, if they do choose so, is to have at least a second language. Joe, you mentioned that if you're not bilingual, you can't have a job. I think the real issue, from my perspective, and we may have a different opinion here, the issue is that we don't have enough jobs.
I shouldn't have put it that way.
No.
I should put it, it's getting more difficult.
Right, okay. Because it's getting difficult, in my opinion, it's because we are lacking jobs. If there be a job for everyone that wants a job, what would we debate? People would have a job. The issue becomes job creation. And private sector creates jobs. Government offers services and creates conditions for growth. And when government offers service, it does create jobs because you need to offer services. But the focus of government needs to be offer services, either healthcare, education, protecting our environment, some regulations that are needed, public safety, infrastructure. But the jobs need to be created by private sector. And the conditions need to be right. And we need to give the tools to all of us to be able to access these jobs. And we need to understand which sectors we want to grow, to have these jobs created. It needs to be married together. And, you know, I looked at a statistic lately. Literacy, I think, Dominic, you mentioned literacy, and I agree with you. When we have people that's got a level 1 of literacy, 25% of them's got a job, are employed. When we have people that are level 4s or 5, which is the highest, 85% of them got a job. It says something. Now, I understand that we need to bring back trades in our schools. I think somebody mentioned it. And we agree. But we also need to bring it back with a job creation plan, because if we train our people in the trades field, and unfortunately they need to move away for a job, it's going to be a challenge to get a return from those people and for them to have a job here and to pay income tax and to be able to reinvest in education and to invest in health care that we need to do, and home care and all kinds of care that we need for our people. So there needs to be a well thought out plan here. And you know, I've said that for the last 2.5 years, and some has criticized me because they're saying another plan for a plan for a plan. At the end of the day, we need to have a roadmap.
Right now, if you compare someone coming out of university with someone coming out of the trades, there's actually probably more demand for someone coming out of the trades, and they're probably going to enjoy a better paying job coming out of the trades than they did coming out of university. So I agree with you that that it doesn't necessarily have to be university. And we, as a province, have identified a number of sectors and have been working to grow opportunities in those sectors. Sectors like value-added food, value-added wood, aerospace and defense, fabrication, and the ICT sector. So we have been working to try and grow the various sectors that contribute to the New Brunswick economy. Now, on the topic of bilingualism, I don't think I even qualify as unilingual. I'm still struggling with English. I understand the need for bilingualism. But in the same breath, I think one of the challenges that we find in this region, because on the Nashwauk River Valley, we are, with a few exceptions, predominantly Anglophone, and we probably have fewer bilingual people on the Nashwauk than other parts of the province, such as the area that you represent. But I think the fundamental problem is that there aren't enough jobs here, period, as my colleague said. And so that's why going forward we're trying to adopt a focused approach that grows various sectors of our economy to create opportunities for all people, not just for university graduates, but for those who are trained in the trades as well.
So it's Bill, the list I have at this point is Bill, Julia, Jim, Stephanie, and someone at the back. Your name, please?
Stan Donovan.
Stan, yes, I know you, Stan. Thank you for your name. And Maggie. And Mark.
It seems to me that we've been talking tonight about, we're sort of on the end of the economic process. On the other end of the economic thing is the globalization that's taking place in the world, which we don't control. It's controlled by people beyond our powers. Those people work with other countries, such as China, the European Union, and Japan, and they bring in products that our people cannot compete with. These international processes are pirating and gutting our middle class. And as long as you sit here and you continue to argue about the details, not that that's not a good thing to do, but you're not getting at the root of what the problem is. There's an unfair level in the world with trade. And if you let the Chinese, for example, how is the free world going to tell the totalitarian Chinese that they're not playing fair? They don't. You can't. But yet, we have exchange of goods on a huge basis with them that come in and undermine our labor. And it can't continue. We're being eroded. Our labor rates are much too high compared with their labor rates. So they can produce a widget much cheaper than we can produce a widget. And that process just keeps on going. Somebody that does the transfer of the money makes a fortune. They're rich beyond imagination. But that's impoverishing our middle class, disappearance of our middle class. Just look at the numbers. There's a book called The Betrayal of the American Dream. And it's out now by economists, and that's what it says. It's erosion from without, and it's being put forth by a special set of people who are making fortunes. You wonder where the 1% is, that's where it is. So, if you really want to get at the issues, level the playing field. If you can do it with China, good luck. You might do it with the European Union, and you might do it with Japan. And that's where I see things going. Now, maybe I'm not right, but I just watch. I've been watching now for the last 20-some years. More. and I just see the gradual decline of our society. And then I see all of these ways to correct things. Take away people's pensions. Get some money from their pensions. You know, remove this and that. We've earned the bloody pensions, and now the government wants to take them away from us. And, furthermore, they haven't even discussed it with us. Haven't even asked us to participate. Here's a government that was going to have openness and transparency and talk to the people.
Well, you're getting lots of applause, but can you shorten it, please?
I'm jumping the gun, but 24,000 people in this province we haven't had any participation in the process at all. So, going back to the business of this international trade, keep that in mind. You want to solve the problem? Think about the other side, and you'll solve it here.
You're talking about globalization. We will never, in my opinion, be able to compete on the wage front with China. Because for them, it's all about low cost, high volume, when they produce things, when they manufacture things. What about New Brunswick and this whole plan that I've been mentioning? We focus on growth sectors, sectors where we can add value to our resources, because there's markets out there for added value products, and they'll pay for it too. We just need to understand from a business case perspective, not from a business perspective, a business case, understanding where are these opportunities, which markets they are, what's their needs, and we can produce it here. I'll give you an example. Sweden, country that I've traveled to once in a while when I was a private sector. In the forestry industry, they're one of the the most important forest product country in the world. They actually have a maximum, in a very simple way, simplistic way. They have, and they want to see the maximum number of Swedish hands touch a log before it's sold. That means they cut a tree and they sell it at the end as a final product. It's called a company called IKEA. Just one example. We need to have a culture where we can add more value to our products, our natural resources. Because there is markets out there, there's consumers out there that wants to pay a premium price for a quality, highly added value product. We need to know what they are and where they are and do it. The private sector needs to play a key role in this. We are adding a lot of value in our forestry product industry, for sure, but we can add more. And government can help in trying to identify these markets. Government can also help in upgrade technology for these things to happen. There's a role for government to play. But that's why I'm saying we need to understand through a complete New Brunswick job creation plan where we want to go, and it's got to be in growth sectors. Because if we go after sectors where it's low wage, high volume, we'll have challenges. But if it's in markets and in sectors where it's growing, it's high quality and highly added value, I think we'll grow our wealth in New Brunswick. And we can't do this in the short term. It's a long-term approach. I get it.
We can compete with China if we do it in a smart way. And I'll give you one example of a real success story in my mind. It's the Wood Science Centre in Fredericton. And there are products in New Brunswick made of maple that can be just as easily produced by bamboo and eucalyptus in China. But thanks to the work of the Wood Science Centre, they have been able to determine that maple is a stronger product, but not just any maple. That New Brunswick maple is stronger than its U.S. counterpart or its Central Canadian counterpart because of our growth season, and because finally an advantage to snow. But because of such a short growing season, the growth rings are packed more closely together, and that gives the wood strength, and it gives it a strength for these products that can't be duplicated by China using bamboo or using eucalyptus. So if we approach an issue in a smart way and use organizations like the Wood Science Center in Fredericton, we can still be competitive.
I think we've had enough globalization. What we need is more localization. The way I think about it is a lot of money, there's a lot of money circulating in the economy, and it's bleeding out of this province to other places, as Bill was saying, and to our detriment. And the same goes with investment money. People are investing money that's being invested outside of this province, benefiting other places and not here. It's an odd situation. We keep talking about there not being any jobs, but you read the papers every day, and St. Anacwick, or whatever it's called now, is crying for jobs because guys are leaving there, highly skilled, going to Alberta because they make a lot more money. Same in Minto at the fabrication plant there. They're crying for jobs, crying for workers, because they can't get them. And down in Charlotte County, where I live, you've got foreign workers filling jobs at major manufacturers in the salmon industry, because why? I don't know. Perhaps it's less costly because they're subsidized for the companies who employ them, or maybe they can't find workers. I don't know what it is, but there's some kind of a mismatch going on, because we keep talking about no jobs, but yet we have these examples all over the province where there are jobs that aren't getting filled, or they're getting filled by people who are being brought in on the foreign worker program. So there's something wrong with this picture, and we need to get it right. One of the things I proposed to the Premier was that that he convene an all-party committee to go around the province and hear from people about what the heck is going on in their communities and what we can do to ensure that we develop our economy and sustain our communities. We can't just grow every sector. Some of them are done. The party is over on fossil fuels, folks. We can't. Some people don't want to leave the party, but it's the case. We've got climate change, we've got oceans being acidified, and that's real. That's reality, and that's setting limits on some of the things that we can do now. So let's look at what we can do and what we need to do in terms of pursuing sustainability. So let's make New Brunswick a renewable energy center of excellence. We've got abundant renewable energy in this province of a whole variety of types that we could harness and go from the feedstock through the manufacturing to use that stuff right to the end. So that could provide tremendous opportunities. But what we've seen is a screeching halt to the momentum we had around renewable energy. You're going to see an Electricity Act coming at this session of the legislature that's going to blunt the targets that we had that were supposed to be ratcheted up to achieve a greater reliance on renewables. And the promises of this government to pursue wood resources as a basis of energy for heating our buildings, heating our homes, haven't materialized. I mean, we've got all kinds of pulp quality wood that we can't pulp anymore because we haven't got the mills that could go into energy. And what are we doing? We're exporting them to Europe so they can displace their dependence on oil. Well, we've got oil, and expensive electricity is going to get more expensive. So you tell me what's wrong with that picture. So I say let's localize, let's keep the money at home and figure out how to do that.
In terms of what we can do as a province, focus on the education system to give us the biggest possible edge that we can. The reason we're losing these jobs is because we can't compete on those terms. The spin-offs from that are making sure we have an economy that's based on ability and merit rather than on patronage, rather than on the connections that you might have to a well-connected family or to people who already are well off and doing well in the business sector. So trying to make a system that's based more on merit and more open to outside positive companies as well. I've talked to 2 business owners since I became leader of the NDP, one American and one European, who didn't locate in New Brunswick because they were so appalled by running into the people in the bureaucracy and in the political parties. One happened to be at the time when the Liberals were in power, one with the Tories, and both of them basically say, well, you need to hire this person to help you as a consultant to help you through the bureaucracy. And exactly the same thing happened with the other company. And both of them decided to locate their company, one in the States, one in Finland. So that's the sort of business opportunities we're missing out on because unfortunately, not to single out the old line parties, but the Liberal and Conservative parties have relied on that network of patronage and favoritism over the last 150 years. It's part of the reasons we're not doing very well. Thanks for the question.
You know, when you think of globalization, it is a huge, huge issue that, you know, I'm not so certain, you know, a province the size of New Brunswick is going to be able to tackle. However, I do believe that we can have policies and procedures in place as a province that helps us offset that and can still create economic growth. Earlier in my presentation, I talked about Germany. Germany pays good wages. They have trade labor unions. They are the second largest exporter in the world. They are keeping the EU afloat, and you see in the news all the time, even I think today, Cyprus and what they're going through with ATMs and austerity measures and all this sort of thing. Germany is the one economy globally that has been able to offset a lot of the problems economically that are going on. So I believe that we can look at that nation and see what they're doing. And you know what they're doing? They are focusing on small and medium businesses. They are not throwing money out to big, large corporations and tax subsidies trying to keep a sinking ship afloat.
The list I have is Julia, Jim, Stephanie, Stan, Maggie, Mark, Joan, Peter, and Gary. Julia next.
I'm glad that in the last few minutes we're starting to steer the direction more towards alternative energies, small business, away from investing into corporations and making money and jobs through big businesses. We need corporate taxes to be risen and create jobs and not cut jobs in education and health. What I am a bit surprised about it is, after 2 hours now into our meeting, that the ugly F word hasn't arisen yet. I know it's a very rude word, but I have to talk a couple of minutes about it. Fracking. I think fracking is on everybody's mind here, or at least very many people that I recognize. And Mr. Kirk MacDonald, I appreciate your narrative earlier about the Nashwauk Valley having a large focus on health and senior citizens, which I must say, I think under alternative governments, probably this strong community would still continue to foster these values. But for example, I just want to bring to your attention in an open letter to the government on shale gas that was delivered 2.5 weeks ago. One of the 29 unions and organizations that have signed and endorsed this is actually the NB Senior Citizens, New Brunswick Senior Citizens Association. So this association that represents 18,000 people has fracking on their mind. So this open letter is demanding a stop to fracking. And I am putting fracking in this, why are you talking about fracking again? Well, we're talking about jobs, and this is the #1 industry that we have been led to believe is going to solve all of our problems. So seniors, as well as other unions, farmers unions, employees, public service unions, and many, many organizations have fracking on their mind big time, but not in a positive light. So in this letter we have asked to stop, an immediate stop, a halt to this industry, so that it can be researched safely. There's no need to bring a risk home to do this here. This is the list of signatures, and there's a very big issue in this that I personally take offense to, and I think many of us do. On November 28th, 2012, in front of the legislature, there has been false evidence being presented by our Minister of Energy and Mines, Craig Leonard. He has falsely ruled out a moratorium based on lies. I mean, it's all in the letter. It's publicly available by now. We have been waiting for a response for 2.5 weeks and I have contacted you about it with an email, and you've told me that you would get back to it. But I want to make this publicly known that many of us have asked for a public response, and maybe what I should do is instead talk to the the parties that are not in power, since your bills seem to be very successful in being taken on our behalf to be, well, I guess lobbying on our behalf of the citizens. Because this here letter, it represents more than 50,000 New Brunswickers, and I think there's way more people.
Today's not democracy, it's partyocracy. And what we need is a true form of democracy that when MLAs are elected, they represent you, not party leader. And until we get to that place, we're going to continue to have no voice whatsoever in Fredericton. Zero. And quite frankly, it's exactly the way the Liberals and Conservatives want it to be, because it serves their best interest, not yours. And that's why we have to protest, we have to take days off work, we have to stand on the freezing lawn of the legislature, we have to shout, we have to scream, we have to write letters, we have to write, you know, all these petitions. If you've got a true democracy where your MLA represents your wishes, you don't have to go through any of that.
In England, in the UK, where our system comes from, they have a system that's much closer to free votes than we do. That there, the default is that every MP can vote the way that he or she feels he or she should. And they consult with their constituents, they consult with whoever they want, and they cast the vote. There are some circumstances under which you say you've got to vote the party line. In the case of the NDP in New Brunswick, that'll be on anything that was in our platform, because I figure if a candidate campaigned on a platform and they're elected on that platform, they should vote for it. But anything new that comes up, just like 10 years ago, British Prime Minister Tony Blair had to go and work to convince every single MP in his party to vote for the Iraq War. He failed to convince, I think it was about 150 of them. There were no penalties for those people. He convinced some Tories to vote for him. There were no penalties for those people. It's encouraging that sort of cross-party cooperation that I think could be useful. Hopefully we won't be trying to invade Iraq as a province, but the principle I think still applies. And but getting back to the issue of making sure that our representatives actually speak for their constituents and also for themselves, because there's lots of the MLAs I know who often disagree with what's being done and they can't speak out. And we saw that last year where I think Kirk MacDonald had some concerns about fracking, but it was very clear there was a vote in the legislature where everyone was told, you are going to vote for this industry, whether you want to or not. And it stops MLAs from becoming experts on policy, encourages them just to become voting machines and people who go out and try and get projects for their constituency and politicize those projects so they can say they did something when it comes to election time. And we should get away from that, make MLAs real leaders in their community who know a lot about the subjects that affect the future of the province. Let the decisions about who's building roads go to the bureaucrats based on the quality and condition of the roads. Let the MLAs become experts on shale gas, on education, on healthcare. That would be a way to move our province ahead.
Right now, it's all about just getting power, losing power, getting power, losing power, getting power, rather than trying to make a difference, rather than trying to serve the public interest. And, you know, instead of resolving problems, we have governments that are simply trying to resolve conflict. So when they hear from people that they're opposed to MB power, they come up with another deal. And people are still opposed to it because it didn't solve the problem. The same thing is going to happen here with fracking, and we're starting to see it. People are opposed to fracking. Government's not going to solve that problem. They're going to come up with a way of trying to resolve the conflict. To get the conflict to go away, to get you guys to all quiet down so they can go ahead with their plans here. So what we really need is what I like to call a rainbow legislature. We need a rainbow of politics within our legislative assembly so that we get better, real debate and better decisions from our legislative assembly than we have with just the two parties going back and forth like the ping pong game that it has been for a long time.
Why wouldn't you just have a public vote and be done with it? Listen to the people. Listen to the people that employed you guys. You know, we're the ones that are going to elect you next time. So just get it over and done with. No one wants fracking.
I'd ask you all to put yourself in my shoes for a minute. In this valley, if we take out the areas of Pepper Creek and whatnot, there are fewer people living in this valley than in the census of 1871. What's going on there? Let's talk about the school in Stanley, who had 288 students last year, and in 5 years' time is on track to go down to 180. I mean, these are serious issues affecting our population. Now, I've heard you loud and clear that fracking is not something that you want in this area. And I don't think that you've heard any rumblings from industry in the last little while to that effect in this area. But we can't say that every place, we can't say definitively that every place in the province does not want it. Because if you drive to the Miramichi, you can see signs. Now I understand that it's not wanted in this area, and I've been continuing to deliver that message. But you cannot say that it is not wanted across the province.